Joining us now, Mark Penn, a former Clinton advisor, Stagwell Group president, author of the book Microtrends Squared. Mark, I said earlier, as a person, I consider myself to be a fiscal conservative. I don't think I've ever seen a Republican president in my lifetime brag about tax increases, because that's essentially what he was doing. And it's actually not the first time I've heard him say that at least one of the rallies recently.
Well, I think you have to look at these tariffs as strategic bargaining chips. I mean, I think, you know, what I've seen President Trump do over and over again is when he doesn't really have anything to bargain with, he creates things to bargain with. And that's what I think what he's done with the tariffs. And when it comes to China, the public really does support him on China. They think China's been stealing American jobs for a long time, stealing American technology, and is out for world economic domination on the back of America.
You know, Mike, this is Lee Carter speaking. I'm fascinated by how Americans are reacting to all of this and really, in general, saying that they support what the president is doing with China and believe exactly what you said, that these are really strategic bargaining chips that he's using with, and think in the long term we're going to win. And we're seeing the president's approval ratings eke up. On the other hand, we're seeing independents starting to, in the most recent polls we saw, we're just talking about the NBC poll that just came out saying that the independents are actually softening towards the president. What are you seeing in your polls?
Well, look, we had at the Harvard Caps Harris poll, we had the president at about 45% approval. We didn't really show dramatic change. I think to the extent the president's ticking up, it's because of the economic strength. 70% of Americans now say that we have a strong economy, and that really is the biggest change in the poll in the last year. I think that's up about 15 points or so. And that is the tremendous shift, and that is what is holding him up, because he's got a 55% approval there. On the other side, immigration, you know, the tariffs, he could have waited till after the midterms on the tariffs, because it does create, you know, some controversy, particularly in terms of Europe and Mexico, but not China. They do support him on China, and that's kind of what we're seeing.
You know, the other thing that I'm really interested in when it comes to the polling is voter enthusiasm. And as we're going into the midterms, it's sort of been flip-flopping over who's more enthusiastic, Democrats or Republicans. And as we're looking at the war on the media, or the media, you know, back and forth between the president, and it seems like the war on that's happening with the media, and the media attacking the president all the time, seems to be energizing Republicans more. What do you see?
Yeah, I think everybody's going to be energized. I am going to be fascinated. We're going to be fascinated by what happens on Tuesday night here in this special election in a Republican district in Ohio. Look, I think that the president has made the choice here: energize his base, go out and rally after rally, and do what worked for him in the presidential. A little risky, because the question is, are independent women in suburban districts who have voted more Republican than anybody realizes going to drift Democratic? And that's really the big question. And the more he plays to the base, to the working class that doesn't typically show up in midterms, the more he may lose some of the well-educated suburban voters who typically do.
Mark, I will say this, and we saw it in 2016, women, wives, mothers vote on the economy. This economy is growing at the fastest pace in 4 years, north of 4%. It could grow even faster in the current quarter based on the most recent estimates. Job growth on average this year is faster than it was last year at this time, which is incredible for an economy into 9 years of an expansion. Wages are growing at the fastest pace in a decade. And then you have good news even on Obamacare. In premiums aren't going up as much as people expected. They're actually falling, according to reports to some of these state insurance commissioners. I think that it's hard to find anything wrong. And look at this. The USDA showed that nearly 3 million Americans have come off of food stamps since President took office. Again, that's what women vote on.
Well, and of course, if I were working with President Clinton and we had numbers like that, his ratings would be in the stratosphere and he'd be untouchable. So the fact that's not the case shows you that that message hasn't gotten through yet. Certainly, the idea that 3 million are off food stamps hasn't gotten through. And it's an important message because the big question here with the tax cuts is, did it just benefit the big corporations, or did the working class and even the working poor benefit? And truth is, as you say, a lot of statistics are coming out.
Do you need to message it, though? 90% of Americans got a pay hike because of the tax cuts earlier this year. 90% of people are seeing fatter paychecks. Do you need to message that? Again, it kind of comes back to, do his approval ratings and do the polls even matter? Because they sure as heck didn't matter going into the election almost 2 years ago.
Well, but the public is fed up that Congress doesn't seem to be able to do anything. I do think the Republicans have a leader who has quit, doesn't even support the president on tariffs, and yet is staying in office. I've said consistently with you that I think the biggest Republican weakness is they have no message and no leadership. The Democrats have weaknesses too, you know, headed by Pelosi, someone who's really disliked throughout the country, and featuring socialists. That's why a voter who's going to go into the polls who's not energized in the middle is truly confused about which way to vote.
You said Nancy Pelosi. Let's also talk about Senator Elizabeth Warren. She was fueling rumors of a presidential run over the weekend, saying, well, you can just listen to this. She's not afraid to be the underdog.
It won't be easy. We're going to have to fight uphill. But me, I'm going up that hill, and I hope you are too. And I hope that when you do, you'll reach your hand out and bring someone else along for the climb.
In terms of policy platform, it's abortion and open borders. I don't know how that wins.
Well, if you look at the Democrats in the Democratic primary, actually Biden has been rising and not Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren gets all the publicity. But he went out, you know, this week with President Obama. You know, I think he has been very quietly positioning himself. Look, I don't think Elizabeth Warren would be the best Democratic presidential candidate. And, you know, the Pelosi-Warren team is really too far to the left for America. But I don't think that's where the rank-and-file Democrats are. And I don't think that's how this is going to play out come 3 years from now.
Joe Biden taking a selfie with President Obama with a big grin on his face. I think that every American could write the caption for that. Mark Penn, thank you so much. Good to see you, my friend. Mark Penn.